I'm sure that information is freely available on the website to anybody. Question number 4, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, what is the security classification of the full report by Rebecca Kitteridge into the Government Communications Security Bureau, and who in his government had access to the full report?
Honourable Bill English on behalf of the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the report has not had a national security classification, with the exception of some of the appendices which will not be released. It has been classified according to normal cabinet procedure rather than securities procedure. The Prime Minister's office has kept copies of the report in the office safe when they've not been required. On behalf of the Prime Minister, I can give the House an assurance that the copy of the report that has been leaked has not come from the office of the Prime Minister.
Order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Mr. Speaker, there were 2 legs to the question, and I acknowledge that the Minister answered the first, but with regard to the second, the question was who had access to the full report. The Prime Minister has said that his office had access to the full report. It wasn't clear from his answer if it was only his office.
Is the Minister happy to expand on the answer? Order.
Mr. Speaker, sorry to complete the answer. The report has, I can't give the member a list of exactly who's had it because the government hasn't inquired into that as yet. But the report in the last couple of weeks would have had fairly broad circulation through a number of agencies and ministers' offices.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order. Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a question on notice. It was very specific. It asked who in his government had access to the full report. He has had a number of hours to ascertain the answer. He has come to the House and failed to answer the question on notice.
Well, he said the Minister may want to elaborate, but he said quite clearly initially in his answer around the Prime Minister's office and addressed that very specifically, and then he went on to say that it's been distributed to a number of agencies. He wasn't specific as to the number of agencies, and I'm not sure whether, even though the question is on notice, whether it would be fair to expect the Minister to list every agency to which they have had access to that report.
Point of order.
I'm dealing with point of order from Dr. Russell Norman.
Mr. Speaker, you've made it clear to me in a letter that you wrote to me that where a question directly seeks factual material, an informative reply must be given. I think it is reasonable for the Prime Minister, in the hours since the question was lodged, to provide us with a list, I can't imagine it's very long, of who has had access to the full report. It's not difficult.
I think... speaking to the point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, this is a matter that has to do with a report into a security agency. I think you are aware that these things are closely held, often numbered copies, often with drafts and numbers across them, and lists kept, sir. Lists are always kept of these confidential documents as to their circulation, and it didn't ask which public servants had it. It asked which parts of his government had it. It was a fairly simple question to answer, and so far, sir, we've seen the House being treated with contempt by the acting Prime Minister.
No, well, I don't think that last part's fair, but I do accept the point raised by Dr. Russell Norman and by the Honourable Trevor Mallard, and I wonder whether I can ask the Minister on behalf of the Prime Minister to be more specific about who in government had access to the full report. Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't be more specific at the moment. I simply don't have that information in detail for the member, and some of it may be confidential. We'd have to work through that process before the information could be made available.
Point of order, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, that's the very point. We know how the system operates. That question would have come in a long time ago. It would have been assigned to a responsible staff member to complete it factually and make sure that at least the primary question gives people the information that they are seeking. Now, you can't come down here and say, well, I don't have it at the moment. We want an explanation now why he didn't bother to treat this Parliament with respect and come down, properly provisioned with information he had hours to answer.
Again, The Minister has now stood out and said he can't give an answer. That is unfortunate. I accept the point that Russell Norman has made, that this was a question on notice. The Prime Minister, or the Minister of Deputy Prime Minister on behalf of the Prime Minister, has simply said, I've come to the House and I don't have that specific information, and then alluded to the fact that it may well be classified and he doesn't want to release. If that's his answer, that's his answer. I cannot do any more to elicit a more accurate answer, but the member has further supplementaries and I'd invite him to use them to try and elicit more information.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave for this question to be set down for further supplementaries after question 12 today, in order for the Acting Prime Minister to brief himself on a suitable answer to the primary question.
Leave is sought for that course of action. Is there any objection to that course of action? There is. Further supplementaries, Dr. Russell Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr Speaker. In light of the fact that the cover note on the report says that the appendices are legally privileged and highly classified, does he believe that the leaking of the full Kitteridge report is a serious offence?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, that may be possible, but we've yet to see what aspects of the report have been leaked.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
If it does turn out that the full report has been leaked by someone in his government, what consequences should face the person who leaked this information, which the GCSB describes as legally privileged and highly classified? What consequences should that person face?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, if appendices that have been given a security classification have been leaked, then there would be significant consequences for the person who leaked them.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Why does the Prime Minister seem confident that the appendices haven't been leaked?
Honourable Bill
Well, Mr
English.
Speaker, it's a matter of whether they appear in the public arena. I mean, the Prime Minister doesn't have the capacity to guess if someone's got them sitting in a shoebox under their bed. But I assume that if they think there's some political effect from leaking those appendices that is worth the risk, then we will eventually see them. They're not in the newspaper today.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Given that so far the only members of his government that he has told us have access to this report is the office of the Prime Minister, did he or a member of his staff leak the report?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, that's not what I said, actually. What I said to the member is that the report has been circulated fairly broadly across government agencies in the last couple of weeks.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
If he doesn't know who leaked the report, will he launch an inquiry to get to the bottom of it, given his previous support for an inquiry into a leak at MFAT over documents that were probably quite considerably less sensitive?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the government simply hasn't considered that at any length. Our primary concern has been that given the leak of the document, it's important that the document is in the public arena so people can see the significant issues that it raises with respect to our security agencies. The other issue has been less important than that today, but who knows? The person who leaked it might own up tomorrow and there wouldn't need to be any kind of inquiry.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
If it is found that over 80 people were illegally spied on by the GCSB, as suggested in the report, will he apologise to them as he apologised to Kim.com, and will he ensure that all the people who have been illegally spied on are given access to all the information that was illegally obtained?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think the member is jumping to conclusions. I think the report shows there's been a very thorough investigation of the activities of GCSB now going back to the year 2003, which includes the period of includes the period of the previous government, and it does raise the question of whether the legislation passed by the previous government was fundamentally flawed. Now, whether any individual has been illegally spied on is yet to be determined.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Given that his own staff took the precaution of locking the report in the safe in their office, why has the government not launched an inquiry into the leaking of a document deemed so sensitive that it needed to be locked in the safe in his office?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I assume the staff of the Prime Minister's office were following the usual procedure they would with documents that were labelled sensitive in the Cabinet process. As I said, a couple of the appendices have a security classification, and of course they would be handled very carefully. Of course, the government will turn its mind to the issue of the leak, but if the member thinks that we behave like the previous Labor government and leak stuff ourselves, the answer is we don't.
Order, that's quite a sufficient answer. Question number 5, Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Social Development.